The Cassinar did not laugh the way people do. They had a thing they did with the breathing frills along their necks, a fast, dry flutter like paper riffling, and the first week aboard I learned to read it. It meant this is beneath comment, and the first time I saw it, all 6 of the engineers on the bay floor were doing it at once, and they were doing it at Pip. Pip is knee-high. Pip is the color of a thing that used to have a color. Pip has 4 legs that are not the same 4 legs it left the factory with, 2 of them being from a different factory entirely, and a manipulator arm I rebuilt myself out of a galley actuator and a great deal of patience. Pip has a dent in the dome where a bulkhead once tried to make a point. When Pip moves, it makes a small sound, a tick and a hum, like an old clock that has decided to also walk. I have had Pip for 19 years. I did not bring much aboard the Immaculate. I brought my hands, my box, and Pip. The Cassinar fluttered. "It is a toy," said the one I'd come to think of as the tall one, because among the Cassinar that is a thing you can be. They are long. They are smooth all over, a pale jointless gray like wet stone, and where I have arms they have something more like the idea of arms, fronds, I suppose, 3 to a shoulder, that taper to fine points and move with a horrible total precision, never a wasted twitch. The tall one's name had a sound in it I could not make, so I called him Vane in my own head and never out loud. "You have carried a toy across 9 systems." "It's a field unit," I said. "It has a dent." "It does." "Why," said Vane, with the patience of a creature explaining water to a fish, "have you not corrected the dent?" "It still works," I said, and that was the wrong answer or the right one. With the Cassinar it took me a while to learn there was no difference, that the wrongness was the point they were enjoying. The frills fluttered all down the line. The dent, to them, was the whole of it. A thing with a dent in it was a confession. A thing with a dent in it admitted, by existing, that somewhere a process had been interrupted and never made whole again. And to the Cassinar an interruption never made whole was not a scar. It was a moral failing left out where company could see. I want to be fair to them because I have had a long time to think about it since, and being unfair is a kind of laziness. The Cassinar were the finest engineers I have ever stood next to, and I have stood next to a lot of them. They did not build machines. They grew them. The whole of the Immaculate, 10 kilometers of dreadnought from her ram to her drive bells, had been seeded as a kind of slurry in vast forming vats and coaxed, over a Cassinar lifetime, into one continuous piece. There were no bolts on that ship. There were no welds, no seams, no panels, no access hatches, because there was nothing to access. Every conduit, every coil, every line of the power lattice had been grown into the hull as a vein is grown into a body, and like a body it was meant to be sealed. You do not open a healthy thing. The Cassinar found the very concept obscene. When a Cassinar system took damage, it did what a body does. It isolated the wound, rerouted around it, and over hours or days it healed, the smart matter flowing back in and refusing until you could not find where it had been hurt. It was the most beautiful engineering I ever saw. It had exactly one flaw, and I will get to the flaw, and the flaw is the whole story, but I didn't know that yet. Standing on that bay floor in the first week, all I knew was that 6 of the best engineers alive were laughing at my little machine, and that I had a job to do. I was there as a liaison. The treaty that ended a war I was too young to have fought in had a long list of clauses, and somewhere down near the bottom, in the part nobody reads, was an exchange of technical staff. A gesture, a confidence-building measure. You put a few of theirs on ours and a few of ours on theirs, and everybody learns the other fellow isn't a monster. I was the few of ours. I was a 41-year-old field engineer with a bad knee and a worse haircut, and I had been chosen, I think, precisely because I was unimpressive, because the people who arrange these things did not want me impressing anyone. In that, at least, the mission was a complete success. "Show it doing something," said one of the others, a smaller one I never named. The frills said it for sport, not malice. "Show us the toy at work." "It's not on shift," I said. "Then put it on shift. We are curious." The frills fluttered. We have never seen primitive work performed. It will be educational. So I put Pip on shift. There was a supply cart in the corner with a fouled caster, a stupid little fault, the kind of thing nobody fixes because it's beneath everyone, and I sent Pip over to it with a hand signal. Pip and I don't talk, we've never needed to. 19 years teaches you a vocabulary of small gestures. And Pip went, tick and a hum, across that flawless floor with all 6 of them watching, and it knelt the way it kneels, with the bad leg first because the bad leg has always gone first. And it got the cover off the caster housing with the galley actuator I'd rebuilt, and it cleared the jam, and it backed off, and the cart rolled true. It took 90 seconds. It was the most boring thing in the universe, and the Cassinar watched it the way you'd watch a man eat a live insect, with a fascinated, fastidious horror, because to them I had just performed an autopsy in public. I had opened a thing. I had put a tool into a wound and moved the wound's insides around with my own, with Pip's own manipulator, and then I had left, and the thing was not healed, it was fixed, which is a different and to them a much filthier word. Healed is what a body does on its own. Fixed is what you do with your hands when you don't trust the body to manage. Crude, said Vane, and it was not even an insult, it was a diagnosis, said almost gently. Effective, I grant, but crude. You understand that we would simply have grown a new cart. I do understand that, I said. It's a good system. I've been admiring it all week. That pleased him. I learned fast that you could get a long way with the Cassinar by admiring their system, because their system was genuinely admirable and they knew it. And a creature that is genuinely good at one thing has a soft place where honest praise of that thing goes in. I meant it too. I wasn't flattering. I'd have killed, back home, for a quarter of what the Immaculate could do. Then you understand, Vane went on, that your little machine and your little box of metal sticks are not engineering. They are what engineering looked like before it became engineering. You are a museum that has come to live among us. We will be kind to the museum. The frills did their flutter, and the others took it up. And that was the welcome, more or less. The museum and its dented exhibit. I went back to my corner and Pip ticked along after me, and I oiled the bad leg because the bad leg likes to be oiled, and I did not think very much about it, because in 19 years of this work I have been called a great many things and museum was, frankly, one of the politer ones. I'll tell you about the box, since it became a character in this. The box is gray. It has a handle worn smooth. Inside the box are the metal sticks the Cassinar found so funny, and the metal sticks are wrenches in 11 sizes, drivers flat and cross and hex in 3 patterns most people have never met, a pry bar the length of my forearm, a roll of seal tape that has saved more lives than I will ever know about, a multimeter older than my father, a coil of wire, a tin of grease, a small hammer because sometimes the answer is a small hammer. And at the very bottom, wrapped in cloth, a thing I'd made myself, a kind of universal interface probe I'd cobbled together over the years that could talk, badly and slowly and through a great deal of patience, to almost any system anyone had ever built, because that is the human disease that we cannot leave a closed thing closed. We have to know what's inside it, and whether we could get in if we had to. The Cassinar had nothing like the box because the Cassinar had never needed it. Why would you carry tools to open a thing you have promised never to open? It would be like carrying a crowbar to a friend's house. The very presence of the box in their bay was, to them, faintly threatening and mostly absurd. A man walking into a hospital with a hacksaw and saying he'd brought it just in case. For 3 weeks nothing happened, and I want to be honest about the 3 weeks. Because the story everyone wants is the story where the fault hits on the first day and the human saves the ship by lunch. And that is not how it went and not how anything goes. For 3 weeks I did small work and watched them do beautiful work, and I learned the bay, and I learned that the chief engineer was a Cassinar named, I'll call her Sol, because the sound she made for herself had a long low note in it, and that Sol was the best of them, which is to say the best engineer I have ever watched, and that Sol did not flutter at me. She didn't praise me either. She simply watched, the way Pip and I watch each other. And once, early on, she watched Pip clear a jam, and afterward she came over and looked at the rebuilt manipulator arm for a long time without touching it. "You made this part," she said. "From a galley actuator. It is the wrong part." "It is," I said. "I made it the right part." She looked at it a while longer. "It is ugly," she said, and there was no flutter in it, it was just true, and then she went away, and that was the longest conversation I had with anyone aboard for 3 weeks. I thought about it more than I thought I would. It is ugly. I made it the right part. I think Saul thought about it too. I think Saul was the only one of them who had ever, even for a moment, lain awake wondering whether ugly and right could be the same part, and I think that wondering is why she was the chief. The fault began on a Tuesday, though they don't have Tuesdays, so I'll say it began the way the worst ones always begin, which is invisibly and beneath notice, and as good news. What happened was that the power lattice in the aft third of the ship developed a micro-fault, a hairline irregularity in one of the groan vanes, and the Immaculate did exactly what it was built to do. It noticed. It isolated. It rerouted. The smart matter began, patiently, to heal. On the monitors it showed up as a small, soft amber bloom, the ship reporting a minor wound and its own confident plan to close it, and the Cassinar saw the amber bloom and were entirely unconcerned, because in their whole long history the amber bloom had always been followed by the green of a wound made whole. The system was not lying to them. The system was doing its job. I want to be very clear about that, because the thing people get wrong about the Immaculate is they think the ship failed, and the ship never failed. The ship did exactly what it was designed to do, all the way down with perfect fidelity into the wall. Here is the flaw. I told you I'd get to it. When the Cassinar isolate a wound and reroute around it, the reroute runs through the next vein over, and that vein now carries its own load and the wounded veins load both. And that is fine, the system is built with margin, the next vein can take it. But the healing is slow. It is grown, not fixed. It happens at the speed of growth, which is the speed of a living thing, hours and days. And while it heals, the next vein over carries the double load. And a vein carrying double load for long enough develops, very quietly, a hairline irregularity of its own. You see it, of course you see it. I saw it on the 4th hour, and Saul saw it not long after, and the difference between us and the rest of the bay was that we'd both spent our lives looking at the place where a clever system's confidence runs out, and we both went cold at the same thing, which was the amber blooms. There were 2 now. Then, by the 6th hour, 3. The reroutes were rerouting. The wounds were making wounds. The ship was healing into a cascade, each patient fix loading the next vein until it too needed a patient fix. And the whole beautiful grown lattice was beginning, very slowly and with total composure, to unzip itself from the aft third forward. And there was no hatch, and there was no panel, and there was no way to reach in and stop it, because they had grown a ship you could not open, on the founding faith that an unopenable thing would never need opening. And now it needed opening, and faith is a poor wrench. I have to tell you what the bay was like in those hours, because the bay is where the change happened, the change that the title of this whole business is about, and it did not happen the way you'd think. There was no shouting. The Cassinar do not shout. What there was the flutter going away. By the 8th hour not one frill on that floor was riffling, and a bay full of Cassinar with still necks is the quietest room you will ever stand in, quiet like deep water, and into that quiet soul spoke the plan, and the plan was the only plan their whole philosophy allowed, which was, wait, hold low discipline, shed non-essential systems to lighten the veins, trust the heel, give the matter time to close faster than the cascade could spread. It was a good plan. It was the right plan for a Cassinar. It was a plan built entirely out of patience and faith in growth, and I stood in my corner with my box and my dented little machine, and I watched the numbers, and I knew, the way you know weather, that patience was going to lose this one. The cascade was spreading faster than the heel. It had been spreading faster than the heel since the 4th hour. They were going to wait, beautifully, all the way down. I didn't say anything for a while. You don't, in someone else's house. You don't walk into a hospital with your hacksaw and start telling the surgeons their business. I had been aboard a month. I was the museum. It was Sol who turned around. She found me in my corner. I suppose she'd known where I was the whole time, and she looked at me. And she did not look like a creature asking for help, because the Cassinar had no posture for that. It had been grown out of them as surely as the hatches had been grown out of their ship. But she looked at me, and then she looked at the box at my feet, the gray box with the worn handle, the box full of metal sticks they'd laughed at, and she said one word. "Crude," she said. And I understood her because by then I'd learned to. She was not insulting the box. She was asking a question with the only word she had for it. She was asking, is this the hour the crude thing is for? She was asking whether the thing she'd been raised to find obscene, opening a healthy machine, putting a tool into it, fixing rather than healing, leaving a scar where there should have been seamless skin, whether that obscene thing might be, just this once, the thing that worked. It cost her something to ask it. I have never been sure people understood how much. To ask it, she had to hold up everything her whole caste believed about what a good machine was, and what a good engineer was, and what she was, and set it down on the floor next to a dented toy, and admit she did not know in this hour which of them was the museum. It might be, I said. I didn't gloat. There was nothing to gloat about. There was a 10-kilometer ship unzipping itself and 1,000 of her people aboard it, and I have never in my life found anything to crow about in that, and I never will. Show me the lattice, not the monitor, the actual run, the grown vein, the real one. Can you get me to it? It is inside the hull. I know it's inside the hull. Can you get me to it? A wall, a floor, something I can open. And there it was, the whole gulf between us in one silence, because she did not have an answer, because open was not a verb her ship had been built to allow. There were no access points. The lattice ran through the meat of the hull where nothing was ever meant to reach it, sealed in the grown matter on the founding faith that it would never need reaching. She had spent her life keeping things closed. I had spent mine getting into them. We stood there in the still-necked quiet, the surgeon and the man with the hacksaw, and the amber blooms multiplied on the screen behind us. And then Sol did the bravest thing I have ever watched an engineer do, which was nothing dramatic at all. She walked to the aft bulkhead, the beautiful seamless gray wall of her flawless ship, and she put one front against it, and she found the place where the wounded vein ran closest to the surface. And she said, very quietly, in the voice of a creature betraying everything she'd been raised inside, "Here, cut here." I want you to understand what cut here meant in that mouth. It meant, I will let you wound my ship. I will let you do the obscene thing. I will stand and watch you put a tool into the body, and I will not look away, because I have done the arithmetic the same as you, and the arithmetic does not care what my caste finds beautiful. It was the single least Cassinar thing a Cassinar had ever said, and she said it without a flutter, looking right at me, and I have respected very few people in my life the way I respected her in that moment. So we cut. I'm not going to dress it up. It was ugly work. It is always ugly work. I had Pip bring the box, and I took out the pry bar and the universal probe and the small hammer, because sometimes the answer is a small hammer, and I went at that perfect gray wall with the dented little machine ticking and humming at my elbow, the two of us doing the thing we'd done 1,000 times in 100 uglier places than this. Pip held the light. Pip held the probe steady against the run while I read the fault, because Pip's bad leg first crouch put its dome at exactly the height of the vein. 19 years of a partnership the Cassinar had laughed at 4 weeks earlier, resolving in that moment into the one tool in 10 kilometers that could be put low and held still and trusted not to wander while a man worked above it. The Cassinar had grown a ship that could not be opened. They had not grown anything that could open it. And a thing that opens other things, a crude, dented, patient little thing built and rebuilt by hand over 19 years to do exactly that and nothing else, that, it turned out, was the part they were missing. That was the wrong part that I had made the right part, standing in their bay. It took 11 hours. I won't walk you through all 11 because most of engineering, the real kind, is boredom under pressure, and the 11 hours were boredom under the worst pressure I have known. We opened the hull at the place Sol marked. We exposed the wounded vein and the one next to it already going and the one next to that beginning to bloom. And then I did the thing the immaculate could not do, the simple obscene human thing, which was, I stopped the cascade by hand, not by healing it, by interrupting it. I clamped the load. I bridged the wounded veins with my own coil of wire and my own seal tape, and a bus bar pip cut down on the spot from a section of decorative grillwork I tore off a wall. Because the answer, when it came, was made out of decorative grillwork and seal tape, and a galley actuator, and a small hammer, and a dented machine that went first on its bad leg. I gave the lattice somewhere to put the load that wasn't the next grown vein, and the cascade, which fed on each new vein it wounded, reached my crude ugly bridge and found nothing there to wound. Because seal tape and bus bar do not develop hairline irregularities, they just sit there being ugly and holding, and the cascade ran into the bridge and stopped, the way a fire stops at a fire break, not because the fire break is beautiful, but because it is bare. The amber blooms went still. Then slowly, with the patience the system had always had, they began to go green. The Cassinar watched the whole 11 hours, all of them. Vane was there, the tall one who had called my machine a toy, and he did not flutter, and at some point in the 8th or 9th hour he came and held the light when Pip's arm needed 2 hands, his fine Franz doing the steadiest, humblest work I ever saw a Cassinar do, holding a lamp for a museum exhibit while it saved his life. None of them said anything. There was nothing to say that the still necks weren't already saying. The flutter, the dry riffling that meant this is beneath comment, I never heard it again. Not once. The rest of my time aboard. They had spent it all in the first 3 weeks, on a dented little machine, and then they had watched the dented little machine hold the fire break while their flawless ship learned the one thing it had never been grown to know, which is that there are hours when you must be able to open the body and put a tool in and leave a scar, and that a scar is not a moral failing. A scar is a thing that held. When it was done, when the green had crept all the way up the screen and the ship was heeling around my ugly bridge the way a tree grows around a nail, Sol came and stood next to me. We were both filthy. I didn't know Cassinar could get filthy. She looked at the bridge for a long time, the seal tape and the bus bar and the grill work, the whole crude, obscene, unbeautiful thing that had stopped the cascade her whole philosophy couldn't reach. "It is ugly," she said. "It is," I said. "You made it the right part." She remembered. From 3 weeks before, the manipulator arm, the galley actuator, "It is ugly. I made it the right part." She'd carried it the whole time. I think she'd been carrying it her whole life and just hadn't had the words till she watched it work. Then Sol did the thing that I have never told anyone about until now, because it was hers and not mine to spend. She knelt down. The Cassinar do not kneel. It is not in their bodies, but she folded that long pale frame down somehow until she was at the height of the dented little machine that had ticked and hummed through 11 hours at my elbow. And she looked at Pip, at the dent in the dome and the bad leg and the wrong factory legs and the galley actuator arm, the whole patched ugly history of it. And she was quiet a moment. And then she asked me, in the voice of a creature setting down something very heavy and very old, "What is its name?" I told her. She tried to make the sound. She couldn't quite. Their mouths aren't built for it, the same way mine isn't built for theirs. But she tried twice and got close, and Pip, who I swear understands more than 19 years has any right to teach a machine, turned its dented dome toward her and gave the small servo dip it gives, the one I've never been able to design out and never wanted to, the little bob that for 19 years has meant "Here, I'm here. What do you need?" And the chief engineer of the dreadnought Immaculate, the finest engineer I ever stood beside, the creature whose people had grown 10 flawless kilometers on the faith that a good thing never needs opening, knelt on the floor of her wounded perfect ship and dipped her long head back to a dented toy, Just slightly, just enough. We fixed a great deal together after that, Saul and I, in the years the treaty gave us. She never did learn to love the box. She thought the small hammer was barbaric to the end, and she may have been right. But she had me teach her cast to build one access point into every grown system, just one. A single place you could open if the hour ever came again that you had to, a scar built in on purpose, before the wound, against the day. They called it in their language by a word that doesn't translate, but the closest I ever got was the humble place. Every ship they've grown since has one. There is a dented machine's bad leg in the design of it if you know where to look. I know where to look. People ask me, when they hear I served aboard a Cassinar dreadnought, what the aliens were like, and they want me to say they were cold or strange or that they looked down on us, and I suppose for 3 weeks all of that was true. But that is not the part I keep. The part I keep is a long, pale creature on its knees on a perfect floor, trying with a mouth not built for it to say the name of a little machine it had called a toy, and a little machine dipping its dented head back, and the two of them meeting somewhere in the middle that neither of them had been built to reach. That is the part I keep. The flutter went away in the first 3 weeks and never came back, and the silence that replaced it was the best thing anyone ever said to me out there. Pip's still going, by the way, still ticks, still hums, still goes in on the bad leg. I never did fix the dent.